Hey folks, MasakoX here. Raditz has had a rough time over the years, and I felt that it was time for the brother of Goku to get yet another time to shine, with a chance to see what could happen if he wound up being the main character of the Dragon Ball story instead of Kakarot. When both he and Raditz had fled the planet of Vegeta during Frieza's final push at the behest of their parents, we're going with the Broly movie timeline for that start by the way, Raditz and Kakarot were pursued by Frieza Force guards, but Raditz chose to flee instead of aiding his little brother, and thusly, he got to go to Earth, whereas his younger brother wound up being the pet monkey of both Vegeta and Frieza. Only Nappa provided him with any sort of figure to look up to, and solace. As for Raditz, his life was rather cushy. As you have seen, even with the power level of about 500 at the time of the first saga, he could still body anybody he would want to without much consideration. If he got it into his head that somebody needed offing, then he could easily see it through. In the last part, the Red Ribbon Army were finally put down, with Commander Red being the most tricky of them all to deal with, even though he's not really a fighter, but still. He wasn't a match for Raditz. Once he had been pointed in the right direction thanks to a rather assertive mercenary Tao getting in the way, and then followed by a spirited challenge from Whiskers the Wonder Cat, the trying to get the water and all, he had taken it upon himself to then finish off the organization on his own with no help from anyone, not even Bulma, not wanting to risk her being involved with the resulting calamity. Since Capsule Corp and the Red Ribbon Army, they were competing manufacturers of goods and transportation and storage. After that though, they had to find the final Dragon Ball and rely on Barba's help to find it with her magical powers. However, we all know that Raditz here is a bit of a cheapskate, thusly he antagonized the old lady, and then she called upon her fighters as usual. But if you recall a past story where we had Gine replacing Grandpa Gohan, Barba chose somebody else instead. Raditz couldn't hold his own against this one. The person staring back at him was none other than one of his parents, but not the nice one. Bardock was staring back at him. Impossible, you might think, but if all have no fury, then a witch scorned. Let's resume our story. Bardock was looking at Raditz, him not wearing his Saiyan armor that he had been bestowed upon. The expression on his father's face, that of mild disdain. Well, are you still a coward, boy? Raditz still felt small in the presence of his father, despite being taller than him by a fair few inches. No, father. Aren't you at least happy to see that I survived? Bardock squinted. Where's Kakarot? Did he make it too? Raditz didn't want to say anything. Instead, he turned to Barba, who was just standing there, or hovering there, and yelled at her. Is this your idea of a sick prank? Cut it out, old hag! Barba shrugged with mischief. I have no idea what you mean, young man. I merely called upon Bardock for this challenge because he was appropriate, and he happily obliged. Bomb was getting nervous. Are you sure this is a good idea, Barba? What's this going to teach him? Barba replied without looking. Humility. He will not come to harm, I think. Bomba felt so helpless. There was nothing she could do other than watch. This was a weird way, to say the least, of meeting your boyfriend's parents. Raditz, tell me, did Kakarot survive? Yes, but Frieza got him. His pod was targeted by his troops and I haven't seen him since, but I know he's alive. There's a dragon, you see, and Bardock smacked Raditz across the face. You didn't help him? You didn't turn back and throw them off? Instead, you chose to save your own sorry hide, didn't you? Raditz clutched his bruised cheek and looked horrified, being reminded of his juvenile cowardice. I regret it every single day. You don't think I'd go back and fix it if I could? Bardock got into his fighting stance. You'll never change. Kakarot, despite his feeble power, is more of a Saiyan than you'll ever be. He threw several punches at Raditz before rubbing more salt into the wound. I'd wished you'd never been born. Bomb was getting incensed at Barba's cruelty. This is teaching him nothing! Only pain, old hag! She now was using the same term as a bow. All this is doing is bringing you pleasure! He's gonna get killed! Barba ignored her fully this time. Raditz got up and spat out blood, looking angrier than Bulma had ever seen him. This was primal rage. How dare you?
I don't care if you are my father. You will not stand there and tell me what I am. I am a Saiyan. I survived. Kakarot survived. And that is more than I can say about you.
Bardock was now mad, and despite the gap in power, Raditz surged forward and fought with every last ounce of strength he could muster. But it was still nothing compared to Bardock. He tore into his own son, and even though Raditz kept going despite the odds being woefully stacked against him, Bardock was the driving force.
Now you choose to stand your ground? Where was that when you left your baby brother to his death? Slam! Where was that during our training, so you could save yourself from menial labor? Smack! Too little, too late! Whack!
Raditz was on the floor, battered and bruised. Bardock stood atop of him, looking like nothing.
You're a disgrace. You're soft. A failure.
Those Earthlings are welcome to you. He turned his back on Raditz and processed what he had just seen. But remember, Raditz may have been a chicken for a Saiyan, but he's a wily one. He had been holding back a little, and in one last move, he let out a yell and attacked with all his might.
Double Sunday!
He thrust out his 2 arms, and 2 bolts of purple ki went straight into Bardock's back. And since Bardock's guard was down, him thinking this was all over, that hurt. Quite a bit. His armor was destroyed, and Raditz's father let out a roar of pain and wheeled around with animalistic fury. Raditz, however, was not sorry. He smiled, actually.
You're right. To you, I may be a disgrace, but I survived. I live with the regret of leaving my brother behind every single day. But one day, I will find him. I am something more. I am Raditz!
Bardock was livid. His own son had attacked him, behind his back.
A coward to the end! Shut up!
Shouted Raditz back. Bardock immediately walked toward him and stomped his boot on Raditz's right hand, which resulted in the latter yelling out in agony. From the other side of the ring, Bulma rounded on Barba.
Stop this! Now!
Barba, now bored, cast a spell to pull Bardock back to the other world. Despite his power level being 10,000 or so, magic was another matter, and the connection to the afterlife had been severed. Bulma rushed to Raditz's aid. He was unconscious, but breathing.
I wish I had some of those beans.
Barba, now hovering over the orb, waved her aside.
All right, fine, I've had my fun. Here.
She waved her hands out bored out to Raditz, and within a few seconds, Raditz's wounds had been healed. At least on the outside. He got up and immediately hugged Bulma, before turning to Barba with seething anger.
What was that? Was bringing up old wounds your idea of payback?
Barba gazed at him with no concern on her face.
I will admit, that was a little more vigorous than I had expected, but you held your own, and fought until you could fight no more. I will help you find the last Dragon Ball, free of charge.
Raditz and Bulma at least got what they had come here for, though. Despite the harrowing situation, Raditz's Saiyan power had increased dramatically from that ordeal. He wished he had a scouter right now because his power felt incredible, like he had doubled his strength in one fight. Now that he had thought about it, this had been the first time since he got to Earth that he had been beaten to within an inch of his life. Everything had been so easy here. With this spirited beating from his own dad, admittedly, Raditz's latent abilities had shown themselves to be rather helpful. When they had the location of the Dragon Ball, the two of them headed out to fetch it. Whilst on their way, Bulma asked Raditz whether he was sad that his father had shown so much contempt for him, his own son.
I don't know. I've learned so much whilst I have lived here. I don't feel the same person that I was when I left planet Vegeta. But that's probably for the best. Saiyans weren't known for their good nature. And in order to survive these days, we need to adapt. Work with other civilizations instead of destroying them. I know it goes against everything I was taught. But this is the way.
Bulma smiled.
I'm glad you think of Earth as home. You have no intention to leave?
Raditz shook his head.
Of course not. Where else would I go? Why would I want to go? I've got you, my friends, and a peaceful life.
And so, the pair of them set off to get the last orb, hopefully to bring Kakarot back to them, once and for all, keeping true to Raditz's genuine vow. Now, speaking of Kakarot, he had found himself in the rings of Mediani Galactic, the galaxy's biggest fighting organization and televisual event, and found it incredibly boring. Granted, he was safe, he was being paid a fair wage, and had a master following across the galactic networks, but none of the challenges that he had faced in the ring or in the arenas amounted to anything special. Now that he knew that he wouldn't come to harm, especially from Frieza as he was told, things had gotten rather safe, bland. Even though his fighting stacks preceded him, many fighters came to try their luck against him, thinking that they were the one that could take him down. He was the little Saiyan that could, and could kick their butts back to Thursday of last week and back. Even when there were opponents who could give him something resembling a challenge, Raditz's gift had ensured that he couldn't be hurt, that he wouldn't come to harm, either through a shield or providing Kakarot a speed boost that he could just about dodge out of the way of any incoming blows. With things calm, he was left weary. However, things would get interesting one day. Ready for another tournament to be televised across the stars. Right there, in the Emperor's box, was Frieza. He had come to spectate in person, with Kui there as his bodyguard, since Zarbon and Dodoria had been vaporized by Uncle Nappa, remember? That was unusual. When Kakarot entered the ring, he and Frieza locked gazes, and despite the distance being notable and they couldn't obviously hear each other talking, it was almost as if Frieza were telling him, "You can't hide from me forever, monkey." Knowing that, Kakarot ensured that he would get on with his job. Or would he? During the semi-finals, Kakarot was up against a showy fighter he had seen before, but had never bothered to remember his name. In fact, he barely knew any of the names. He liked to show off despite his woeful power, but this time, this might have been a blessing in disguise. Winning a locked duel, Kakarot chose to throw the match, pretending to be injured and no longer able to battle. He collapsed to the ground and didn't get up, deliberately. This caused pandemonium, the first defeat of Kakarot's time in the league. What an upset! Even the guy he was fighting couldn't believe it. When Kakarot was carried out on a stretcher, Mota was right there, looking concerned. She knew why he had thrown the fight. "Okay, kid, I didn't see that coming. Frieza has never accepted a physical invitation to attend before." He leapt out of the stretcher and looked furious.
"You said I'd be safe. He's gonna find me and drag me back to a life of serving him. You gotta get me out of here."
Mota looked incredibly pained. She didn't want to relinquish her greatest fighter, but she now felt that Frieza had great interest in getting him back, so she would probably lose his services anyway. The only difference would have been that Frieza could have paid off the CEO. But she was the CEO, so she didn't care. Mota had made a vow anyway to keep Kakarot protected. That was the only reason he would come. And this was looking less likely of being true by the second. "Come with me, kid." She motioned Kakarot to follow. The pair of them headed off to the arena's parking lot, where a small speedster craft was present. "Take my ride. They won't suspect anything."
"Wait, won't you need that?"
"I have a habit of losing my ships all the time. It's become so regular that nobody bats an eye. They just get me a new one. That's how good I am here. But I'm sorry this didn't work out. I didn't anticipate this." Kakarot sighed.
"I know. Thanks for giving me somewhere to stay and regroup, though. It's been a rough time to say the least. At least I had some stability. Do you think this could get me to Earth?"
"Earth? Oh yeah, should do. I've been meaning to check that area of the galaxy out anyway. It's an untapped mine, in my opinion, for new talent. If you find anything, let me know. That's the least you could do, me giving you my ship." With that, Mota and Kakarot shook hands, and the latter sped off into space, now with Earth locked on his sight.
"I'm coming, Raditz."
As for Mota, she did her usual pleading to the boss about losing her car because of thieves, but Frieza had other ideas. Something was up, but he could wait. Knowing fate, their paths would cross again. Back on Earth, the seventh ball had been located, and it was with the Pilaf gang. However, upon finding them, Pilaf just handed it over. He knew that Raditz was powerful, and there was no point fighting him this time. He could tell that he was not in the mood to fight anyway. And besides, the 6 balls had been amassed in one place when they checked out their own scanner, so their cause was lost for the time being. They had to find another way to try and take down the Saiyan, and a certain rice cooker they found might be the thing to do it. With that, the 7th ball had been gathered. There and then, Shenron was summoned, and Raditz gave the wish to bring Kakarot to Earth. In an instant, Kakarot appeared right at the tip of Shenron's tail. He had no idea where he was. 1 minute, he had been in Molta's old ship, and the next, he was here. But once his eyes had adjusted, he saw 2 people. A green-haired girl and Raditz! The 2 of them had found each other. They embraced and let out a huge sigh of relief. It was over. The wait to be reunited was over. Shenron then dispersed, and the 2 of them now had plenty to catch up on. But the question on Bulma's mind was apparent. Would Raditz tell Kakarot the real reason why he hadn't gone back to save him all those years ago? Well, we shall have to find out next time, because that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now. If you'd like to see another story in which Raditz features considerably, check out the full story of his mother Gine as she raised Goku on Earth, where Raditz is a freedom fighter.